Hello everybody, this is Yasmeen from Yarkspiri and welcome to another week's video tutorial. So during last week's video tutorial you guys actually voted, and thanks to that vote the results came in and I painted this illustration. As you can see, this is a samurai water elemental as per requested. Since I was going to be painting water elements, the first thing I needed to do was to look at dynamic waves or water to get a good idea of the sense of the color palette I was going to use. So the best resource I found so far is actually looking at surfboarding reference. Mainly because of the shots that are taken, they tend to have much higher contrast, much more saturated colors that tend to look much more appealing. So this was the main reason why I focused most of my referencing, at least for the color palette, on those types of images rather than just looking at waves or something similar to that. Now, because this was going to be a samurai, the second referencing that I had to do was to obviously reference samurai armor and get an idea of how it's actually put together before I can actually start reinterpreting the actual design of the samurai suit. Now, unlike most of my previous paintings, at this point I've actually decided to start off with the color palette. Now, the main reason why I have done this is because I'm focusing mainly on looking at my reference material and sampling the colors visually to try to get more saturated colors or more appealing colors and a palette that would work well. I was not directly color sampling these colors. Instead, I was trying to train my eye to actually be able to visually pick up the colors without actually having to use the eyedrop tool instead. Since I don't normally use the eyedrop tool, this is something that I'll sometimes practice just to get more familiar and work on my actual color analysis ability. So right now I'm actually just using my flat brush that I've customized a while back, and I'm using this mainly to rough out the basic information. Once I have that basic information, I transferred back up to a textured brush, one that would help me actually paint in some more waves. Now for this entire image I actually ended up using about 5 or 6 different brushes, most of which were customized only for mainly the wave areas, because essentially when waves are crashing they spew out wave particles, but it's almost like a white foam that tends to go outwards, and I wanted to have that effect. So the best way to do this was to use the customized brush for this. Now this entire image actually was extremely short. It only took about 4 hours to paint entirely. The main reason why it didn't take as long to paint was because I did not start off in grayscale and then add colors. Generally speaking, I've found that if I start off with the colors right off the start, it tends to go much faster painting wise. Now there are some downsides to that. I find that I have to keep on switching on and off my saturation layer just to make sure I have enough contrast throughout the painting process. Otherwise, areas will turn out to be too light and will actually sometimes blend in too much, even though they're different colors and they still stand out from each other when they're colorized. They don't do so when they're in grayscale. So a really good step is to just double check it with the saturation layer that's filled to black. Now at this point I had the basic design for the character done, but I wanted to include some more background elements. So what I did is I simply increased the size of my canvas, then I used my marquee tool and expanded the edges of it just to fill it up with color. Once I had this in place, I was able to sample further colors that were already in the painting and apply those to the waves that I was painting in. Now as I'm working on the waves, I am once again using that textured brush, and I'm alternating between a couple different brushes just to experiment what different effects might work best for this painting. Once again, I am looking at quite a bit of reference material. It is very important, especially when it comes to waves. Now what I did as an extra step, however, and what I'm currently doing now, is I actually added a color layer above everything. What this allowed me to do is to then go in without actually changing essentially the grayscale portion, like the colors still contrast normally. I was able to add in more profound colors. So I was able to really fine-tune my color palette to become more saturated with colors, and I found that in the past it was more difficult just to figure out on the color slider exactly what color I wanted, and it was much easier just to use the color layer, and that's what I did in this point. So once I had those more saturated colors, the next step was for me to sample those colors and re-tie them into the rest of the painting. It's really important that throughout the painting I'm making sure everything works together, and the easiest way to do that is just to tie in different color elements to make sure that they do. So I'm just working on the arm right now. I have already decided that I am actually not going to show a face because this character is part of the water. So underneath his armor, he's actually going to have water and waves inside. So you'll see it in his helm once the piece is actually completed. But I also wanted to have his staff, his spear, actually once again be compromised of water itself. So I started off by fully painting it in. It was okay, but I found I didn't like it as much. So what I actually ended up doing is I painted out a portion of the staff and then tied it in with some more waves. And once I did that, everything tied in a lot better to the overall painting. So I'm just fine-tuning the background right now because there's still some streaks that are visible and the colors don't quite match, and I'm just highlighting key areas in the top of the character and the top of the waves to really help showcase essentially the froth-like motion of these waves and the power that they have. Adding more highlights, and I'm being very selective in where I'm adding these really sharp highlights too. I don't want to go overboard with these highlights. And almost immediately after, I go in with saturated green and I add those colors in just to help balance out those whites. So I've just darkened up some portions, and now I'm just adding some more waves. Essentially he has almost a cape, but once again it's tied into the ocean, it's part of the ocean, so it's almost leaping out to attach itself to him. So I'm removing that staff right now, and I'm going to be painting in essentially the water actually coming out and forming this staff that he's made out of. And you can see the water in the helm now. So I'm going to be adding some boats. So all I did for the boats is I painted the one boat and then I just duplicated it and changed its perspective a bit, helped tie it in a bit more and its size. So this is the final illustration, as you guys can see, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And do make sure to vote for next week's video tutorial in order to essentially ensure that what you want to see is chosen. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.